Every evening, just before the sun dips behind the far hills, my husband and I sit by the window. It's an old wooden frame, the paint chipped, the glass slightly fogged with age, but it gives us a clear view of the dusty road that leads to our home. That's the road our son used to run down, barefoot, with his school bag bouncing against his back. I can still hear his voice sometimes, bright, young, full of promise. He would call out, "Mama. Papa. Look what I found by the stream." Now, that same road stays empty. Only the wind passes by, whispering through the tall grass, carrying bits of dry leaves and the faint sound of the river below. We sit there, not because we expect him to appear, not anymore. We sit because it's what we've always done, together. Waiting, remembering, hoping without saying the word hope aloud. Sometimes my husband reaches over and holds my hand, the way he used to when we were younger. His grip is weaker now, but steady. He doesn't say much these days, but I know his silence holds more words than my heart can bear. There's an ache in waiting, not sharp like pain, but soft and constant, like a slow river beneath the soil. We used to count the days between his letters. Then we counted the months between his calls. Now, we just count sunsets. Maybe he's busy. Maybe he's built a life that doesn't have room for the quiet we live in. And that's all right, I suppose. Children grow. The world changes. But sometimes, on evenings like this, when the light turns golden and the air smells of rain, I still imagine hearing his footsteps again, coming up that road, calling, "Mama, Papa, I'm home," and even though I know he won't, I still smile. Because somewhere deep inside, part of me is still waiting, not for him to return, but for the sound of love that once filled this house. Our home sits on a small hill at the edge of the village. It's not much to look at, just 2 rooms, a kitchen, and a porch that creaks whenever the wind blows. But it has stood through every season with us, like an old friend that refuses to leave. When we first built it, my husband and I were much younger. He worked with his hands, laying every brick himself. I remember him laughing, his shirt soaked with sweat, as he said, "This wall will stand longer than both of us," and it has. The house carries the sound of our lives, the creak of the old bed, the tick of the clock, the rustle of curtains when the breeze passes through. There's always a faint scent of wood smoke from the kitchen, mixed with the smell of the earth after rain. Every corner of this house holds a memory. The marks on the wall where our son measured his height every year. The small wooden chair he refused to outgrow. The kitchen table, scratched and worn, where he once spilled his milk and cried until I kissed his forehead. I still keep his plate on the second shelf, the one with a tiny chip on the rim. It feels foolish sometimes, keeping things as if he might walk in tomorrow, but letting go feels even harder. My husband, Ramesh, spends most of his mornings in the garden now. He grows beans, brinjals, and sometimes marigolds. He says it keeps his hands busy, but I know it's more than that. The garden gives him something to care for, something that doesn't leave. He doesn't talk much about our son, but I see it in the way he looks at the road when he thinks I'm not watching. He used to be a proud man, tall, strong, with laughter that filled the house. Now, his shoulders bend slightly, and his eyes carry that quiet, faraway look, the kind that only comes from waiting too long. Our son's name is Arav. He was our only child. A quiet boy, gentle and curious. He loved the sound of the river near our house and used to follow butterflies into the fields. Sometimes, he'd come home with muddy hands, holding a pebble as if it were treasure. We didn't have much, but we gave him what we could: school books, warm food, and love. So much love. He grew fast. One moment he was chasing chickens in the yard, and the next, he was taller than me, his voice deeper, his dreams reaching far beyond our little hill. When he turned 18, he told us he wanted to go to the city. "I want to work there," he said. "I'll make enough money so you won't have to worry anymore." Ramesh smiled, but I could feel the worry behind it. The city is far, and life there moves too fast for hearts like ours. But we didn't stop him. How could we? Every parent dreams of seeing their child fly. The morning he left, the sky was cloudy. I remember standing by this same window, watching him pack his small bag. He hugged me tight, tighter than ever before, and said, "Don't cry, Ma. I'll come home every few months." I nodded, pretending to believe it. Ramesh placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "Take care of yourself, son. Remember, no matter where you go, this is still your home." Arav smiled and walked down the path, turning once to wave before he disappeared around the bend. That was 12 years ago. For the first few years, letters came often. He wrote about the tall buildings, the lights that never went out, the noise of cars and people. He said the city made him feel small but alive. He missed us, he said, but he was doing well. Then the letters came less often. Calls replaced them, quick ones, between his busy days. Then even the calls slowed down. He got a new job, he said once. Later, a promotion. Then he mentioned someone, a girl named Mira. He said she made him happy. We were happy for him too, even though we'd never met her. Eventually, his words became shorter, rushed. "Sorry, Ma, I've been busy. Papa, I'll call soon, I promise." And then, silence. Months passed. Seasons changed. We sent him letters, small notes written with care, but most came back unopened, address not found. Still, every evening, Ramesh and I sit by this window. It's become our ritual. He brings 2 cups of tea, and we sit side by side in silence, listening to the world outside, birds returning to their nests, cows coming home, the village children laughing in the distance. Sometimes, I talk to him about the day, about the laundry, the flowers blooming, the neighbor's new puppy. Other times, we don't say anything at all. Words seem too heavy now. People in the village often ask, "Did your son ever visit?" I smile and say, "He's doing well. He's busy." It's easier that way. They nod kindly, but I can see the pity in their eyes. On Sundays, the local postman still stops by. He knows our house well. Every time he comes, my heart beats a little faster, hoping he'll hand me something, a letter, a card, anything. But he only shakes his head with a gentle smile. After he leaves, I fold my hands in my lap and whisper, "Maybe next week." We've grown older in this waiting. Our hair turned white, our steps slower. But the love, that never faded. If anything, it grew stronger in the silence. I think that's what love really is, not grand words or promises, but the quiet willingness to keep waiting, even when there's nothing left to wait for. Sometimes, in the evenings, I light the small oil lamp near the window. The flame flickers softly, dancing on the glass. It reminds me of the nights when Arav used to study late into the night, his face glowing under the dim light. Ramesh still keeps his old school trophies on the shelf. Dust gathers on them, but he refuses to move them. "Let them stay," he says. "They make the room feel less empty." I nod. I understand. This house, this window, this road, they've become our world. We don't expect much anymore. Just the sound of wind, the call of the night birds, and the hope, faint but living, that someday, we might hear those footsteps again. Maybe not today. Maybe not ever. But still, we wait. It began with the silence. Not the quiet kind you enjoy after a long day, but the kind that settles into the corners of a home and makes you wonder if you've done something wrong. At first, my husband and I didn't notice it much. Life in the village was simple and slow. We had our little routines. I'd sweep the courtyard early in the morning while the birds were still half asleep, and he'd check the vegetable patch behind the house. We'd have tea together by the window, the same spot where we used to watch our son play when he was little. He used to run around that patch barefoot, chasing after dragonflies, falling, laughing, getting up again. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still hear his small feet against the earth. But now, the only footsteps are ours. When he left for the city, we were proud. I remember the way he hugged us that morning, firm, full of hope. He said, "I'll come back often, Ma." Don't worry, I believed him. In the beginning, he called every few days. His voice was full of excitement. He talked about tall buildings, crowded buses, and people who walked too fast. I could hear the city's hum in the background whenever he spoke. It made me happy to know that he was seeing a world much bigger than ours. Then the calls became less frequent. Once a week. Then once a month. Each time he called, I tried not to sound disappointed. I told him, "We're fine, Beta. Just make sure you eat well." He'd always say, "Of course, Ma. Just busy these days. I'll visit soon." But soon became a word that lost its meaning. I began to prepare his favorite dishes whenever he promised he'd come. The smell of fried onions and ghee would fill the house, and I'd set the table for 3, out of habit, out of hope. My husband would look at me quietly, then at the empty plate. We wouldn't say anything. "He'll come next time," I'd whisper. "Yes," my husband would say softly. Next time, but the next time didn't come. The village slowly changed too. Many of our neighbors' children left for cities. Some returned once a year with gifts and new clothes. Others never did. The old homes began to feel like waiting rooms. Sometimes I'd see other parents sitting by their doors, just like us. Waiting. Listening for the sound of a motorbike or a familiar knock. One evening, as we sat by the window, a letter arrived not from our son, but from our neighbor's daughter, who worked in the same city. She said she had seen him once, at a cafe, with friends, laughing. She said he looked well, happy. I smiled when I read it, but deep inside, something ached. Why hadn't he written? Why hadn't he called? I wanted to believe he was just busy, but at night, when the lamps were off, I'd lie awake, wondering if we had somehow become strangers to our own child. One winter, I decided to visit him. I told my husband, he might not have time to come here, so maybe we should go to him. He looked hesitant. What if we disturb him? The city life is different, you know. I said, we're his parents. We can't disturb him by loving him. So, we packed a small bag, a few clothes, some sweets, and a knitted sweater I made for him. The city was overwhelming. So many people, so many lights. We had his address written on a piece of paper. After asking around, we finally found the building, tall and gray, with metal gates. When we reached his flat, my hands trembled. I knocked. Once. Twice. He opened the door. For a moment, he just stared. Then he smiled, but it wasn't the same warm smile I remembered. It was polite, almost nervous. "Ma. Baba. You should have told me you were coming." I laughed softly. "We wanted to surprise you." He looked behind him, into the apartment. A young woman came out, elegant, well-dressed. "This is my wife," he said quickly. Wife. The word caught me off guard. I had heard nothing of it. No letter. No call. She smiled gently. "Namaste, Auntie. Please, come in." We stepped inside. The home was beautiful but felt unfamiliar, too clean, too quiet, too modern. There were no signs of our boy anywhere, no childhood photos, no books, no little things he used to keep. I tried to speak, but everything felt distant. He talked for a while, about his job, the city, the weather. But I could feel his unease, like he was waiting for us to leave. His wife offered us tea. She was kind, but I sensed she didn't know what to do with us, two villagers in her polished world. After an hour, he said gently, "Ma, Baba, you should rest now. I'll book a taxi for you." I forced a smile. "Of course, Beta. Don't worry about us." He hugged us before we left. It was brief, almost formal. When we got into the taxi, I held my husband's hand. Neither of us spoke. The sweater I'd made for him stayed folded in my lap, untouched. Back in the village, everything looked the same, but we didn't feel the same. My husband became quieter. He spent hours staring at the fields, lost in thought. One night, I asked him softly, "Do you think we did something wrong?" He shook his head slowly. "No, we raised him with love. But love doesn't always pull people back." Those words stayed with me. From then on, our waiting changed. We no longer expected the sound of footsteps. We still sat by the window, but not out of hope, out of habit, out of love. Sometimes, I'd look at the road and imagine him walking toward us. Other times, I'd whisper a prayer, not for him to return, but for him to be happy, wherever he was. The silence still fills the air, but it no longer hurts the same way. It's become a companion, gentle, quiet, forgiving. That winter was colder than any I could remember. The wind carried a kind of loneliness that even warm tea couldn't chase away. The mornings were misty, the fields pale with frost, and our little house felt bigger and emptier with every passing day. My husband had fallen sick. Nothing serious at first, just a cough, a little fever. But over the weeks, it lingered. He grew weaker. The man who once carried sacks of rice on his shoulders now struggled to lift a bucket of water. I tried to hide my worry. "It's just the cold," I'd say. He'd smile faintly. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just getting old," but deep down, I knew it was more than that. It was the quiet, the long waiting, the unspoken sadness that had slowly settled in his chest. Every evening, I still sat by the window, like always. Watching the dusty road, hoping to see a familiar figure. But now, my prayers had changed. I no longer prayed for my son to come home. I prayed for my husband to hold on a little longer. One afternoon, I decided to call our son again. It had been months since our last conversation. I dialed his number with trembling hands. He answered after a long ring. His voice sounded busy, distracted. "Ma? Everything okay?" I tried to sound cheerful. "Everything's fine, Beta. It's just, your Baba's been coughing. Nothing to worry about." He sighed. "Ma, you should take him to a doctor. There are good hospitals there, right?" Yes, I said softly. "He's resting now." There was a pause. Then he said, "I'll try to come next month, okay?" Next month. The words felt heavy, like a promise wrapped in distance. "Take care of yourself, Ma," he added. And then the line went silent. I sat there, phone in hand, staring at the quiet house. A few nights later, my husband's cough worsened. He refused to go to the hospital. "It's just the weather," he whispered. I stayed awake beside him, holding his hand, listening to his uneven breathing. At dawn, he looked at me and said something I'll never forget. "Don't wait for him anymore," he said gently. "He has his own life now. Let's not tie our hearts to footsteps that may never return." Tears welled up in my eyes. "But you used to wait with me," he smiled faintly. "I still do, but not for the same reason. I wait for peace, for both of us." Those words pierced through me, soft and deep. A week later, I received a message from our son. Just a short text, "Ma, sorry, got caught up with work. How's Baba now?" I didn't reply right away. What could I say in a few words that could explain the weight of our days, the silence of our home? By the time I finally typed back, I wrote simply, "He's better. Take care of yourself." That night, my husband slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. I watched him breathe, slow and calm, the lines on his face soft under the dim lantern light. In the stillness, I realized something: waiting had become my whole life. I had forgotten how to live in the moments I still had. A few mornings later, I woke up before dawn. The sky was just beginning to pale. I made tea, the way he liked it, and sat by the window as usual. The chair beside me was empty. I called out to him softly, thinking he might be outside tending to the garden. But he wasn't. He was still lying in bed, still as the quiet around him. When I touched his hand, it was cold. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The world stood still, the birds, the wind, even the clock on the wall. My husband, my companion of 40 years, had slipped away, gently, silently, without waking me. The days that followed were a blur. The neighbors came. Words of comfort were said. Rituals were done. But I heard none of it. My mind was somewhere else, lost between the sound of his last breath and the echo of our waiting. When everyone left, I sat alone by the window. The chair beside me remained empty. That evening, I looked at the road, and for the first time in years, I didn't wait for footsteps. Instead, I whispered, "He's home now." The next morning, my phone rang. It was my son. "Ma. I just saw your message. How's Baba? Should I come home?" I closed my eyes. My throat tightened. "He's gone, Beta," I said softly. There was silence on the other end, long and heavy. Then a small, broken voice, "What? When?" "Yesterday morning," I whispered. Peacefully. He didn't speak for a while. I could hear him breathing unevenly, struggling to find words. Finally, he said, "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" I didn't know what to say. How could I explain that I wanted to spare him the guilt of not being here? That I didn't want him to rush down the same road we once watched together, too late for goodbyes? "I didn't want to disturb you," I said quietly. He cried then. For the first time in years, I heard my son's tears. He came home 2 days later. When I saw him step out of the car, I almost didn't recognize him. The years had changed him, his face older, his hair shorter, his eyes tired. He hugged me tightly. "I'm sorry, Ma. I should have come earlier. I should have called more." I didn't say anything. I just held him close and whispered, "You're here now." We sat together by the window that evening. The same spot where his Baba and I used to sit. He looked out at the road, just like we used to. After a while, he said, "He really loved this view, didn't he?" I nodded. He did. He used to say the road was alive, always moving, always bringing someone home. My son's eyes filled with tears. "I never realized how much I missed this place, how much I missed both of you that night." He stayed in his father's room. I could hear him crying softly through the walls. And though it broke my heart, I also felt something healing, as if the silence between us had finally spoken. The next morning, he sat beside me again, holding a cup of tea. "I'll come home more often now, Ma," he said. I smiled faintly. "Don't promise. Just come when you can. Life doesn't wait, but love, it stays." He looked at me quietly, nodding. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The years of waiting, the longing, the pain, they didn't disappear, but they softened. Because even though my husband was gone, he had given me one final gift: our son had found his way home. The weeks after my husband's passing moved slowly, like clouds drifting across a winter sky. Some days felt heavy, others strangely light. The house had grown quieter, yet somehow fuller, filled with memories that refused to leave. My son stayed for nearly 2 weeks. During that time, he helped me fix the leaking roof, cleared the garden, and even repaired the old radio his father had loved so much. We didn't talk much, not about the past at least, but sometimes silence says more than words ever could. Every morning, he would join me by the window. We'd sip tea together, mine with a touch of ginger, his plain, and we'd watch the village wake up. Children walking to school, farmers heading to the fields, the old postman riding his bicycle down the narrow road. For years, I had sat there alone, waiting for footsteps that never came. Now, those same footsteps echoed again, not the ones I had imagined, but new ones, softer, slower, more present. One morning, as the sun poured gently through the curtains, my son said, "Ma, I don't know how you did it. All these years, waiting here, just you and Baba." I smiled faintly. When you love someone, waiting becomes a kind of prayer. You don't count the days. You just keep believing. He looked down, ashamed. I should have been here. I kept thinking there would be time later. But life just swallowed me up. I reached for his hand. "Your father understood, Beta. He never blamed you. He just missed you." He nodded slowly, eyes glistening. I think I was afraid to come back, afraid to face what I'd lost. I squeezed his hand gently. "Then maybe now, you can come back not out of guilt, but out of love." He didn't answer, but I could see something soften in him, like a knot finally untangling. When he finally had to leave, he packed quietly. He stood at the doorway, looking at the empty chair by the window. "I'll miss him, Ma," he said softly. "So will I replied. "But he's still here. You'll see him in every sunrise, in every quiet moment you take for yourself." He hugged me tightly, and for the first time, I felt his embrace not as a son rushing away, but as a man coming home. "I'll visit soon," he said. I smiled. "Don't say soon. Just say you will," he laughed through his tears. "Okay, Ma. I will." And then he left, but this time, the silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt peaceful. After he was gone, I went back to my old routine. I swept the floors, watered the garden, fed the birds. But everything felt different now. The air carried a kind of calm acceptance. In the evenings, I'd still sit by the window, but I no longer waited for the sound of footsteps. I just watched the world go by, the golden light falling on the fields, the children laughing in the distance, the rhythm of life continuing as it always does. Sometimes, I'd speak softly to my husband, as if he were still beside me. "You were right," I'd say. He came home, not just to visit, but to remember who he was. The wind would move gently through the curtains then, and I liked to think that was his way of answering. One afternoon, as I was tending the small rose bush outside, I found an envelope tucked behind the window frame. It was a letter, my husband's handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were just a few lines: "If you're reading this, it means I've gone ahead. Don't let sorrow turn your waiting into regret. Promise me you'll keep living, not for me, but for yourself. And when our son returns, smile for both of us." I sat down right there on the porch, the sun warm on my face, tears gently falling. It felt like he was still guiding me, even from beyond, reminding me that love isn't meant to be chained to absence. It's meant to move, to grow, to heal. Days turned into months. The seasons changed, the mustard flowers bloomed again, and the evenings grew softer. My son began calling more often. Sometimes from work, sometimes while cooking dinner. He'd ask about the neighbors, the weather, even the old cow in the backyard. And every few months, he'd visit, sometimes bringing his wife, sometimes alone. He didn't stay long, but every visit felt like a gentle patch on an old wound. He'd sit with me, fix something around the house, eat the food I made, and then we'd sit quietly by the window. The silence that used to ache now felt warm, filled with shared memories, laughter, and unspoken forgiveness. One evening, while watching the sunset, he turned to me and said, "You know, Ma, I finally understand why you waited. It wasn't just for me, was it?" I smiled. "No. It was for the love that built this home. For the man who taught me patience. For the hope that kept our hearts alive." He nodded, eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. "I think I'm finally learning that too. Life continued as slow, quiet, beautiful in its own way. Sometimes I still missed the chaos of having a full house, the sound of laughter, the smell of food cooking, the footsteps in the hall. But I also learned to find peace in solitude, to see it not as emptiness, but as space for memory to breathe. The village children often visited me now. They'd bring flowers or mangoes from the orchard. They called me Amma, even though I wasn't their mother. In their innocent chatter, I felt something healing, a reminder that love doesn't end with loss, it simply changes form. One day, while cleaning the cupboard, I found an old photo, my husband, our son, and me, taken years ago in front of the house. We looked younger, happier, untouched by time. I placed the photo on the windowsill. Now, when I sit by the window, I see not just the road ahead, but the faces that built my life, the ones who gave meaning to every waiting day. The road is still there, stretching beyond the fields. Some evenings, I still hear footsteps in the distance, travelers, neighbors, children running home. But now, I don't look up expecting anyone. I just listen, and smile. Because I finally understand, the people we love don't always come back the way we imagine. Sometimes, they return through memories, through lessons, through quiet moments when our hearts finally stop aching and start remembering with warmth instead of pain. That night, as I watched the stars through the window, I whispered, "Baba, I'm keeping your promise." I'm living, softly, quietly, but fully. And for the first time in a long while, I felt something lift, like the house itself was exhaling. The waiting was over. What remained was love. And love, I realized, doesn't need footsteps to stay. It just needs space to keep shining, in the quiet rooms, in the fading light, and in the heart that still remembers. The days have grown quieter now. The fields outside sway with the rhythm of the wind, and every evening, the sun melts into the same golden horizon it always has. I still sit by the window, our window, the one where my husband and I once shared endless cups of tea and soft laughter that echoed through this small house. Only now, I sit alone, but not lonely. The silence doesn't hurt the way it used to. It wraps around me like a warm shawl. Gentle and familiar. It carries his voice, his laughter, the faint hum of his favorite song that sometimes still lingers in the air. I often think back to the time when waiting felt like all I had. Every evening, I'd listen for the crunch of footsteps on gravel, hoping my son would come home, that maybe this time, the road would finally lead him back. For years, it didn't. But now I understand something I couldn't see before. Waiting was never about counting the days or longing for footsteps. It was love in its purest, most patient form. A quiet faith that even distance can't erase what's written in the heart. And when he did come back, even just for a while, I realized that love doesn't always return with grand gestures or apologies. Sometimes it returns through presence. Through shared silence. Through eyes that finally meet without pain. After my husband's passing, I thought I'd never feel whole again. But grief, I've learned, doesn't end. It softens. It changes shape. It settles beside you like an old friend who doesn't speak but understands every sigh. Now, when I walk through our home, I no longer see what's missing. I see what remains. The photo frames on the shelf. The marks on the kitchen wall from when our son was small. The rose bush blooming outside, exactly where my husband planted it years ago. Life didn't take everything. It simply asked me to love differently, to hold memories instead of hands. Last week, my son called. He told me he'd be visiting again next month, bringing his children this time. I smiled when I heard their voices in the background, bright, curious, full of life. "Ma," he said, "they want to see the house where I grew up. The window you always talk about." My heart swelled. I could almost see it already, little feet running through the hallways, laughter echoing in the same rooms that had once known so much silence. Maybe that's how life works. The ones we love go away, but their stories circle back in new forms, in the laughter of grandchildren. In the flowers that bloom every spring, in the letters that never fade. Sometimes, I talk to my husband at night. Not in prayer, not in sadness, just like before, in simple conversation. "Can you believe it?" I whisper. "Our son's finally coming home again, and he's bringing your smile with him." The window creaks slightly as a soft wind passes through, and I imagine him sitting there beside me, nodding like he always did. Quiet, steady, full of peace. I don't wait anymore. Not because I've stopped hoping, but because I've found peace in what is. The footsteps will come when they come. And if they don't, I'll still have the sound of the wind, the rustle of leaves, the warmth of memories that never left. When I close my eyes, I see it all, my husband's gentle smile, my son's tearful eyes, the endless road leading from this house to the world beyond. Every part of it is love. Every part of it is home. Tomorrow morning, I'll sit by the window again. The tea will steam in my cup, and the sun will fall softly over the fields. Maybe someone will walk down the road. Maybe no one will. But either way, I'll smile. Because I finally understand, love isn't measured by who stays or who leaves. It's in the waiting, the forgiving, the remembering. And though the road outside is long and quiet, I know now that I am not alone. He's still here, in the wind that whispers his name, in the warmth that fills this home, and in the love that never really closed the door.